Here it all begins with a young priestess joining a gang of inexperienced adventurers who choose to invade a goblin-infested cave. Things swiftly go wrong when the inexperienced team is attacked by goblins, which leads the boy to be killed and the girl to be raped and captured. After brutally attacking all group members when the goblins are about to attack the priestess, Goblin Slayer approaches the moment. Goblin Slayer saves the priestess by slaying the goblin attackers in a flash. She then makes the decision to follow Goblin Slayer as he finds his way farther into the cave, killing more goblins while educating her on their mentality and strategy in combat. Goblin Slayer is able to eradicate the remaining goblins, including a goblin shaman and hobgoblin, with the priestess' assistance. The goblin infants are then cruelly killed by Goblin Slayer in order to keep them from growing up to pose a threat. The priestess then chooses to travel with Goblin Slayer in spite of her horrible experience. Goblin Slayer goes to the city with his childhood friend Cowgirl, who is accompanying him to sell the products from her uncle's farm. Later, he goes to the Adventurers Guild in search of work, where the other adventurers treat him as an outcast because of his poor quality armor and propensity to only accept tasks, referring to goblins despite the fact that he is a highly ranked adventurer. Despite this, Guild Girl, a staff member at the guild, is pleased with his commitment to the eradication of goblins because there is not many adventurers are willing to do goblin quests because of their poor rewards, and those who do are frequently inexperienced. Goblin Slayer claims that goblins attacked his town when he was a little child, and virtually all of the residents were slaughtered, including Cowgirl's parents. He saw his older sister being gang raped and then killed by goblins there.
He trained himself to kill goblins as a result, but he also developed social anxiety and a killing goblin obsession, which is why Goblin Slayer will never be normal, according to Cowgirl's uncle.
Despite her uncle's concerns, Cowgirl sticks up for her friend because she wants to make apologies to him for leaving him behind the day before the goblins invaded their village. Later, a goblin fortress is attacked by Goblin Slayer and Priestess, who burn it down and stop the goblins from escaping. Somewhere else, a high elf and her allies are searching for Orkbolg, an adventurer. Guildgirl gets inquired by high elf archer, dwarf shaman, and lizard priest about the adventurer known as Orkbolg and Birdcutter, but in reality, they were trying to call for Goblin Slayer, which in their language sounds like Orkbolg and Beardcutter words. After introducing themselves as the modest visitors, Lizard Priest claims they need to speak with Goblin Slayer immediately since they have an urgent matter. While Goblin Slayer is going to have a discussion with them, Priestess shows her desire to get involved in the conversation, but Goblin Slayers forbid her by telling her to take a rest. When several inexperienced adventurers attempt to persuade Priestess to quit Goblin Slayer and join them, believing he is simply using her as bait, she is defended by Witch, a comrade of Goblin Slayer, while he is away for a conversation. Goblin Slayer is informed by High Elf Archer that his race has allied with the human kingdoms to combat the army of the reborn Demon Lord and that they are interested in hiring him for a mission linked to this. Goblin Slayer initially declines as demons are not his concern, which is much to High Elf Archer's frustration. However, when Dwarf Shaman and Lizard Priest mention ruins in elven lands occupied by goblins as the elves are unable to mobilize their army due to political considerations, the High Elf Archer becomes more considerate. Goblin Slayer, after listening to all conversion demands for the ruins maps and after getting agreed to help them on the mission, immediately leaves. Goblin Slayer claims to go on this mission alone, but after Priestess requests him to let her go with him, he immediately agrees, and then Priestess also joins their mission. The company sets up camp and eats the food of their own races as a drunken High Elf Archer chastises Goblin Slayer for acting rudely, as the others discuss the origins of goblins. The following day, the gang penetrates the ruins when a High Elf Archer kills the Goblin Sentinels. As the group of the Goblin Slayer enters the ruins, he observes that there are no totems, indicating that a shaman is not in charge of these goblins. After saving an elf prisoner who was being tormented by goblins and being enraged, High Elf Archer swears to exact revenge on her clan. The group locates the goblins sleeping in a hall, and to eliminate sleeping goblins without disturbing the others, Goblin Slayer's crew employs sleeping and silence spells. However, the goblins' leader, an ogre who is a general under the Demon Lord, is informed by their silence. The ogre uses his strength and fire spells to attack the group, and because of his size and quick healing capacity, he proves challenging to slay. When his comrades are at their breaking point, Goblin Slayer utilizes his secret weapon, a magic teleportation scroll that Witch gave him, to inflict severe harm on the ogre before dealing him the fatal blow. When elvish reinforcements approach to take control of the ruins and Goblin Slayer's group retreats to the city, her interaction with Goblin Slayer and his obsession causes High Elf Archer to desire to accompany Goblin Slayer on a legitimate adventure. Goblin Slayer assists Cowgirl in transporting goods into town once he is healed from his wounds. He meets a High Elf Archer, a dwarf shaman, and a lizard priest there and informs them of his interest in joining them while they explore nearby ruins. Priestess formally praises Goblin Slayer for saving her life and tells him she has been promoted to the next adventurer rank. He then runs into two teenage explorers who have lost a sword in the sewers and tells them to make an improvised weapon out of a club so they can find it. Guild Girl asks him to watch as she punishes a Rhea Scout for stealing loot from his party during a promotion exam. Rhea Scout considers attacking Guild Girl but is deterred by the appearance of Goblin Slayer. Thanks to Goblin Slayer's assistance, the two teenage explorers manage to reclaim the sword in the interim. Then, Sword Maiden herself makes a special request of Goblin Slayer to kill several goblins. The first Demon Lord was killed 10 years ago by a group of heroes, including Sword Maiden. The revived Demon Lord is currently killed and his army defeated by the new hero and her allies. However, some of his generals are still at large. The rest of the group travels to Watertown to meet Sword Maiden, who has since retired. Sword Maiden informs them the goblins in the town's sewer system are thought to be the perpetrators of a recent run of horrific killings. She made the decision to contact Goblin Slayer because past explorers have failed, and the army won't deploy to combat goblins. The group enters the sewers after Goblin Slayer convinces them to accept the task, and shows them how the goblins have mastered the usage of boats. Goblin Slayer is perplexed by this because goblins have never been clever enough to use boats before. Following the destruction of a goblin vessel, the group draws the attention of a giant alligator, which they take advantage of by duping it into annihilating the other goblin vessels. Goblin Slayer worries as they reach the surface because the goblins could utilize boats but weren't aware of the alligator, prompting him to believe that someone had deliberately put them in the sewers. After taking a short break in town, Goblin Slayer and his group return to the sewers to look for the goblins' origins. As a precaution, Goblin Slayer brings a canary to alert them if any poison gas is there. The group descends further into the sewers but is trapped in a tomb and lured into a trap. The canary alerts the party that the goblins are also pouring toxic gas into the space, and they successfully block the vents to stop the gas from coming in. The group is then directly attacked by the goblins, which suddenly reveal that a goblin champion is in charge of them. As the goblins encircle the remainder of the group, the goblin champion critically wounds Goblin Slayer and engages Priestess in combat. Spurred on Priestess's scream, Goblin Slayer wakes up and attacks the goblin champion from behind, tearing out his right eye in the process. The group has a chance to reorganize as the goblin champion and his henchmen flee. Priestess's injuries have healed, but Goblin Slayer passes out from his injuries. After receiving healing through a miracle of the resurrection, Goblin Slayer awakens at the Temple of Law. Goblin Slayer learns from Sword Maiden that she was kidnapped, raped, and tormented by goblins 10 years ago, which is the cause of her scars and partial blindness. She is still utterly terrified of goblins, despite being one of the heroes who slew the Demon King. While Goblin Slayer and Priestess spend the day in town gathering supplies and fixing their equipment, High Elf Archer, Dwarf Shaman, and Lizard Priest opt to continue scouting the sewers. Goblin Slayer receives a surprise present from Witch and Spearman, who have just arrived. Despite her uncle's concerns that Goblin Slayer might not return at all, Cowgirl is still impatiently awaiting his arrival. The following day, the entire group returns to the sewers and discovers a room manned by a formidable monster. Goblin Slayer scatters the fine flour from the package around the room to cause a dust explosion. After it is killed by the explosion, the group investigates the curious mirror that the demon was guarding. The group learns that the mirror is actually a gate that connects Watertown's sewers with the Green Moon and lets goblins in. As the lizard priest attempts to remove the mirror from the wall, the rest of the group repels the goblin counterattack headed by the goblin champion. Once the mirror gets loose, Goblin Slayer instructs the group to take cover under the mirror, and Dwarf Shaman tears down the roof. While the goblins are destroyed, the group stays unharmed as a result of the mirror's protection. The group cements the mirror and submerses it in the river because they can't be sure other goblins won't figure out how to utilize it. Sword Maiden receives a report from Goblin Slayer informing her that he believes she knew more than she admitted. She acknowledges the enormous alligator that patrols the sewers is her familiar, whereas the mirror was put there by a group of demon worshippers that the hero had already exterminated. Sword Maiden put off dealing with the goblins even after the masterminds were eliminated, because she secretly wanted other people to be aware of the cruelty goblins are capable of. Goblin Slayer simply informs her that he cannot heal her of her trauma, but he will kill goblins upon her request, even in her dreams, which helps ease her fear. Goblin Slayer explains to the group that he wants to produce ice treats on the journey back to their town, and they agree to lend a hand. She becomes the 10th person to ever receive a platinum rank, and it is proven that the hero defeated the Demon Lord and his army. All around the country, celebrations are held while Goblin Slayer goes about his daily tasks in the meantime and visits the town with Cowgirl to get his armor fixed. When he runs into the rest of his group, they invite him to lunch and show him where senior adventurers are instructing newer adventurers. However, Cowgirl and Guild Girl will also be joining. While having the meal, Guild Girl announces Guild has begun a program to have retired adventurers train new adventurers, so retired adventurers can continue to work and new adventurers have a better chance of survival. However, Cowgirl wonders if Goblin Slayer will ever retire. The following day, Goblin Slayer completes further farm tasks and reads a letter from Sword Maiden in which she expresses gratitude for his assistance, and informs him that she no longer dreams of goblins. The following evening, Cowgirl has a brief conversation with Goblin Slayer and advises him to consider his future. As she gets ready for bed, she reflects on the fact that the Goblin Slayer will eventually run out of goblins to kill and speculates what would happen then. The next day, as Goblin Slayer does his routine patrol of the farm, he finds the goblins' footsteps. According to Goblin Slayer, the farm will soon be attacked by a swarm of more than 100 goblins. He cautions Cowgirl that he cannot defeat many goblins in the open and begs her to leave, but she won't leave her house again. Goblin Slayer travels to the town to request assistance from the other explorers. They initially decline because there isn't a quest or prize listed for taking on the goblin swarm. Then, Goblin Slayer offers his entire possessions, including equipment, money, expertise, and time as payment for aiding him in the battle. After knowing how much Goblin Slayer is serious about the situation, Spearman, Witch and the two beginner adventurers whom Goblin Slayer assisted readily agree to battle beside him in exchange for food, or drink later in the adventure. After Guild Girl has posted a bounty of 1 gold for each killed goblin, the remainder of the adventurers is persuaded to join. Goblin Slayer warns the group about the Horde's adventurers, who are being directed by a Goblin Lord, a highly clever goblin with a focus on leadership. The first several waves of goblins are quickly dispatched because of Goblin Slayer's well-thought-out plan for the adventurers' defense against the Horde. The Goblin Lord then attacks the heroes with a number of hobgoblins and goblin champions before attempting to flee, but being stopped by the Goblin Slayer. While the skilled adventurers handle the hobgoblins and goblin champions, Goblin Slayer battles the Goblin Lord alone but loses. Priestess, however, performs 2 protection charms to capture the Goblin Lord just as the Goblin Slayer is about to be killed. It is revealed that this was all part of his plan, acting as bait so Priestess could mislead the Goblin Lord and capture him. The Goblin Lord tries to trick Priestess by pleading for compassion, but this fails, and Goblin Slayer kills him. The adventurers return to the guild to rejoice after killing all the goblins and securing the farm, where Goblin Slayer confides in Cowgirl, who has begun to show interest in becoming an adventurer. When Goblin Slayer takes off his helmet, the priestess requests as her reward. The other adventurers are astonished to see his face for the first time. Wow, that was quite the story. He is indeed a handsome man, wouldn't you agree? Hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe for more awesome videos. I'll see you all in the next one.